Morning. Great to see so many of you. We'll get started in a minute. We're just going to give people a moment to keep filing in. And Gabby, if you can help me keep an eye on that waiting room, be great. Cool. I hope everyone's comfortable and you've got teas and coffees and breakfast if you need it. Yeah, it's really lovely to have so many of you here. I'm gonna pin myself for a moment. Okay, I'm gonna make a start. I'm sure people will carry on filing in over the next 5-10 minutes. But welcome. My name is Tesney and I manage the events and communications for Culture Declares Emergency. I'm based in between Bristol and Mid Wales, and my work outside of Culture Declares involves quite a lot of land work and herbalism. So yeah, it's really lovely to kind of be integrating those two things today. Also really excited that we've got Karine, our new national coordinator, joining today's session. So this is a perfect opportunity for her to say hello and introduce herself to everyone. So we'll be hearing from her first. For those of you who are new to Culture Declares Emergency, we are a movement of artists and cultural organisations who have declared a climate and ecological emergency, and through creative practice are committing to telling truths about the injustices at the heart of the Earth crisis, to take care within our communities and to inspire and activate change. I'm sure we've got lots of declarers in the room, potentially quite a few new people who haven't come across Culture Declares yet. It was really brilliant at the last open space. We had lots of new faces. So for those of you who haven't declared, we invite you to do so. It's a really powerful, generative process. It's quite a simple kind of step-by-step on our website. And we've got a lot of resources that can support you on your journey of declaration. So just a little bit about these breakfasts. We've started running them, well, we'll be running them every month from now on. And we'll be alternating between a themed breakfast where we unpack a particular theme together and we bring in speakers and we have a little bit more kind of structure around the discussion, and then a more open space where people can bring offers or requests, share a little bit about your work. We had an open space back in July and it was really, really beautiful. People were really honest and vulnerable, and it felt like a really valuable space. So we'll definitely be doing that every other month. And the intention behind these breakfasts really is just bringing people together and holding space for our community to connect, inspire each other, support each other, bring questions, bring challenges. It's really impossible to overstate the importance of community at the moment, and especially as independent artists doing this work can feel pretty exhausting, maybe quite lonely and isolating at times. So having these spaces where we can come together and remember that we're part of a much bigger collective, it's really valuable. And also just remembering that we're much more powerful and can affect much more change when we work together. So yeah, really wanting to support collaborations within these spaces. It's also really important to us that you can come to these breakfasts just however you need to, and that they don't contribute to any sort of Zoom fatigue or anxiety. So everyone is totally welcome to, if you need to be with your camera off and cozy in bed with a cup of coffee, that's totally fine. If you want to be out walking in nature, just listening through headphones, that's totally fine. Just however you need to be here is okay. So before we dive in, yeah, as I do every month, I want to really welcome every one of you and every part of you that's showing up today, whatever you're bringing with you, whatever you're holding, whether you're feeling a little bit frazzled and exhausted. I personally am. It's been a full-on couple of weeks. Maybe you're feeling slow and insular. We're stepping into autumn now, which is a much quieter, more introspective time of year. So perhaps you're feeling like you don't want to contribute so much, or you perhaps don't want to share so much. Or maybe you're feeling really open and excited and collaborative, and all of these things are okay. So maybe we can just take a moment to land together. If you want to stretch out a little bit, move your body if that feels good. Get a little bit of movement in your shoulders, and yeah, maybe you've been awake for a while, maybe you're still waking up. So just landing in this space. And if you'd like to plant your feet on the floor, if that suits how you're sitting, how you're joining, just noticing the connection between you and the floor. And if you'd like to, close your eyes for a moment and just gently checking in with how you're feeling and how much energy you've got today, how much capacity you've got. Just checking in whether there's anything you need. And maybe while you're here, just setting a little intention for the morning. Maybe you just want to listen. Maybe you'd like to connect with someone new. Maybe you want to be brave and share a little bit about your work or share a request with the community. And if you'd like to, in your own time, just take a deep breath to land in this gathering together. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so before we dive into hearing from some speakers, I'm just going to give you a moment to say hello to each other in little breakout groups. If you don't feel like talking, you can keep your camera off, just put something in the chat. I'll give you about 5 minutes, and I'm going to make recreate. I'll probably have about 3 of you per room. So just over a minute to share a little bit about your practice, maybe where you are and why you're here. And we'll come back into a space in 5 minutes. So everyone's going to join back into this plenary space, but it's great to chat to a couple of you. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Nice to see you all. Hello. I hope you all had a chance to meet someone new. Sorry to those who just joined this meeting whilst a lot of people were already in breakout groups, and we created our own little kind of liminal breakout group in the plenary space. But great to have you back. Okay, yeah, I just want to draw attention to Bridget's comment in the chat. And Bridget's one of our brilliant coordinators who's been around since the beginning of Culture Declares, and just mentioned that we're not just artists, and I know the word artist doesn't resonate with everyone. You know, our movement includes museums, heritage sector, community, intangible heritage, community organisers. So it's a big group of people and change makers and thinkers and researchers. Okay, so we're going to hear from our first speaker now, who is Karine, who is also our new national coordinator, which is really exciting. Karine started this month. Karine, I'm just going to try and find you and spotlight you. If you're ready, there you are. You're ready to begin sharing.
Okay, can everybody see? I'm putting my timer on. If I should hear it, but please, please stop me, Tesni. Should I go over? So, good
Sorry,
morning,
Karine.
everyone.
Sorry, Karine. There's a
Yeah,
little pop-up in the window that, there we go. Yeah, perfect. Thank
yeah.
you.
So yeah, good morning, everyone. Bore da. This is Good Morning in Welsh, and I am based in North Wales. As you can hear from my accent, I'm not originally from the UK, but from France, but been in the UK for longer than I've actually been living in France. And so there'll be two parts in my presentation. First is going to be a really brief introduction about my background as I'm taking this new role on board as a national coordinator for Culture Declares Emergency. And then I'll share my experience of working in partnership with environmental organizations, some of my key learnings, some of the challenges as well I came across, and hopefully some advice. There's plenty more out there, but I'll try to highlight a few key things. So this picture is actually probably the first project I did in relation to reconnecting people with nature back in 2007 or 8, I can't quite remember. It was with Simon Whitehead, and I commissioned him to work with artists in the landscape, with an historian. So it was a combination of landscape, heritage, and the arts coming together to help people understanding the place, a place that may be familiar for them, but to rediscover it through very different eyes and experience it completely differently. So in terms of my background, I didn't used to mention my origins, but I started to a few years ago because I realized how much they have shaped who I am, how I work, my values, and why I've been developing all this work. So I come from a family of peasants, and I make a difference between peasant and farmers. I'm talking about a small holding where it was very much survival, growing your own foods and be completely self-sufficient, having a very strong connection to working with the land, connection to nature, and a very, very sustainable lifestyle. And I realized this is deeply ingrained in me, and how much that had led me to do what I do today. The turning point was in about 2007 when I felt really compelled to bring together my personal values as a citizen, where I was already very active and aware of the climate crisis, how disconnected people could feel from nature, the damage humankind activities were inflicting on the natural world. And I've wanted to do something about it. So I was doing this as a citizen, but I realized that through my work, I felt like I had a duty, a responsibility to do this, but also an immense, powerful tool and means to reach people in ways that maybe other disciplines couldn't do. And that's how I started to commission, curate different projects with a view to reconnect people with nature and raise awareness about the climate and nature crisis. I co-founded an organization called Migration, and I started to specialize in developing partnership with environmental organizations. And I moved on 3 years, over 3 years ago, to a more strategic role because I wanted to have a bigger impact as well and extend further all the experience that I accumulated through taking a role with the Arts Council of Wales as their creative nature program manager. This was part of a big partnership that brought together two large institutions, the arts and the environment, with the Arts Council of Wales and Natural Resources Wales. And together we delivered two huge programs. One was first climate justice plan for the arts in Wales. And the second one was a very visionary program called the Future Wales Fellowship that brought two cohorts of 8 artists to have an extended period of time to do creative research, to explore their practice through the question of the environmental crisis and reconnection with nature. And now this next chapter is coming on board with Culture Declares Emergency as a national coordinator. So this is just a really quick overlook of some of the projects I did, which were really an invite for people to simply stop and spend time with nature. One of the highlights was 3 Hagaba Marshmallow Laser Feast, which I co-commissioned and co-produced with the Southbound Center and 2 international partners. And we went on to win the best VR experience at Tribeca Film Festival. And the way I work is, it's about high impact contemporary art that I take out of the art centers and art galleries. It's always through partnership. And why I do that, it's because and that's one of the things that shaped me. I come from a working class background. Culture was not something that was part of culture as we define it as contemporary art was not something that was part of my life. That's something I felt quite excluded from. And I wanted to make sure I could reach people who thought contemporary art was not for them. So that's why I started to work very much into the landscape, into the public space, to really reach out to different audiences as well and engage them with those issues and learn from them, which is something I will talk about later as well. So I'm going to talk about a case study which features some partnerships I developed with the RSPB. And we did several partnerships together, again with Marshmallow Laserfish, with In the Eyes of the Animal. But the first one we did, and has been the most significant and has been a turning point, not just for the work I have done subsequently, but has really had a massive influence on the arts and environmental sector, at least in Wales, because from there, a lot more partnerships and projects were developed on the back of this, because they saw the impact. So I curated, as part of this partnership, New Men for Use. So the artist called New Men for Use, with the installation called Tape. And here on the right, you can see some of the impact that this installation and collaboration had. But while we worked together, the RSPB approached migrations. Basically, some of their staff members came across another project I had been curating and commissioning with Rosemary Lee and Simon Whitehead, called Calling Tree. And I was just absolutely baffled by the number of people we had there around the tree, and the activities that were happening around it, and how diverse these audiences were. And that's something they really wanted to learn from us. So they really wanted to bring the expertise of migration and how we were working in order to address gaps or things they felt they were not achieving within their own organization. One was their image. The image they were really perceived as conservative, and they wanted to have a much more contemporary image. They realized their audiences were very much families or retired white people, and they really felt like they needed to do much more work in order to reach a much diverse people and engage them in their activities. So this is how we started to work together. I spent a lot of time just talking with them to really understand what was at stake with them, what they wanted to do, and then to see what I could do in response to this. So this is how Tape came into place. I really wanted to find a way to bring that installation somewhere in Wales. But the way I work as well, beyond working outside of the art centre and the art galleries and going into the public space, is also I really think about the contextualization of the work. So it's not just, oh, it's going to look amazing, because this would look amazing everywhere. It's where it makes sense to present it and why, and how we can have more impact in terms of what we do if we choose the right collaborations, and if we choose the right context and narrative to present this work. So this is why I saw as well, yes, RSPB wanted to learn from migration, but I really wanted to learn from them as well, to see how I can make my work more impactful, more meaningful, more relevant when talking and engaging people with the climate and nature crisis. So one thing we measured, among many others, was, because we wanted to see whether this collaboration, what it did in terms of reaching different people. And what people said is that over 60% of them said that usually they did not engage with contemporary art because they thought it wasn't for them. So for me, that was a big finding, because that's what I wanted to do and make sure I'm doing through my work. So that was a big an important outcome for me. But over 70% said they did not usually spend time in nature. And what we saw after that is that an increased number of people coming into Butte Park, which chose the location really strategically. I wanted the installation to be seen from outside of the park, because I wanted people that never came there to come into the park because of this strange object that was there. And then we could use this as a platform to raise awareness about the work that RSPB was doing. So the result from them is that they reached new audiences, attracted new volunteers, but they were able to also raise important messages that their work was more than just birds and the countryside. They were actually doing a really incredible work in urban settings where wildlife habitats were under huge pressure. And that was something that was really unknown in terms of the work they were doing, but they were able to engage a lot more people around those issues. In terms of some of the key learnings, well, I don't think I need to, I'm preaching to the convince here, but it's a unique power of the arts to engage people in ways that other sectors might not be able to. There's a real power to create an immediate emotional engagement, but also to create inclusivity. That's something I learned even more so in my previous role with the Arts Council of Wales, with the Future Wales Fellowship. We made a big point of bringing really unheard voices that you traditionally excluded from the climate change conversation because they've got no agency or they completely underestimated what they can bring to this conversation. And that's just been absolutely enlightening. And that absolutely informed how we went on to create the climate justice plan for the arts that we decided to go through co-design to make sure those voices could be heard. And when you do this through creativity, it's a way to create an equal basis, a safe space for people to feel like that they can contribute. And again, that's something from my experience. I come from a class that was not given a voice, or when you try to speak, you were not taken seriously. And that's something I experienced a lot. So to be able to put in action things that do break down those barriers is really, really important. And the arts can absolutely do that. One bit of advice I always give to everyone for artists who want to work with the environmental sector as well as the environmental sector to work with artists, just be curious about what you will learn. Do not assume you know everything or you know better. I learned so much because I spoke to so many team members, the volunteers, the tree surgeon, everyone involved, the communication teams in the environmental organization I worked with, and I make the work better. And because of this knowledge I accumulate in understanding how to work with the trees, so we left no trace, so we didn't do any damage, so we didn't have any negative impact on the wildlife that inhabited these ecosystems, I was able to use and all that information in engaging with audiences, because a lot of people didn't come for the arts. They were like, what are you doing to the trees? You're damaging the trees. But because I had all this knowledge gathered from the teams of experts within the RSPB, I was able to then start from their point of concern, to then move on the conversation, to engage them with the arts at some point once I'd been able to reassure them. So that's really, really important when working with a cross-sector, is to be true collaborators, to really want to learn from the other, to be prepared to let go of what you know, to create something together that is new. And nearing the end, it might sound really small, but I've heard so much using the arts or using nature, and I don't want to use those words anymore, because for me, they're just part of the problem of this extractive method we have used that have led us to where we are today, because we think of using something for a purpose. When I'm using the words working with the arts and working with nature. Again, it's a collaboration, it's respect, and it's about being non-extractive. So it's a small change, but I have really, really kind of insisted on that with my colleagues in the past, and think, let's use this vocabulary so we can start to change how we actually think about the work we do and bring different values. In terms of the challenges, when working for creatives, working with environmental organization, there's a disbalance because of the size. just generally of organization. I felt it with migration compared to RSPB. You know, we were small, even though we were quite significant in the art sector. So it's really thinking together how you create a really equal partnership and fair partnership in relation to how much you can provide within and bring within that mix. And you're not going to be able to bring exactly the same amount, but each of you is going to be able to bring something really of equal importance. There will be difference of cultures in this organization as well, because they might be driven by different purposes and huge constraints and expectation of outcome that they have on them because of the funding they receive. So it's to be really aware of these. And while it needs to be challenged to do something new, is to be also very understanding of that, to understand how they operate, how they think, and how together you can start to shift on those things to make room for a new culture and new values. But often there's an adaptive structured contract and understanding of intellectual properties, for example. And this is where it can become quite difficult because there's a best intention in environmental organization in wanting to work with the arts. But they will think of it as a procurement, like they procure a contractor to build something. And the art don't work like this. So for all these different things, what I'm advising to environmental organizations to make sure you bring the right expertise on board, because curating, producing, managing arts projects are a particular skill. And that's something that it's important to learn from and to bring on board in order for those collaboration to work well and to avoid all the pitfall I've just mentioned here. I'm going to finish now because I've reached the end. But to everyone, whether it's environmental sector or creative, just look outside of your own sector. Never assume you know everything, and get inspiration from all kinds of sectors, because there's something to learn from everyone. I'm just giving some examples here, but from farming, from indigenous culture, from nature itself, from your neighbors, from the land, the stories, and these people, there's always something to learn. So never, never underestimate that. And I repeat myself, be curious. And I'll finish with this sentence: take care of yourself and everything that surrounds you. That's not my quote. I've stolen it from a program I love, but I love concluding my talks with this quote. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Karine. That was really, really wonderful. Lots of lovely reactions coming from all the participants. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing in your personal story as well. I think that's something we all need to get better at doing. And yeah, for speaking to some of the challenges about building effective collaborations. That's what I'm really interested in understanding today, and getting some really good advice from people that have experience of building effective collaborations, because it definitely isn't without its challenges. So yeah, thank you so much. We will have a chance for everyone to ask questions. Once we've heard from all our speakers, we'll have some open space. So if you do have burning questions for Karine, you could drop them in the chat now, or just save them for our open space. Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to remove the spotlight from you. And now we're going to hear from Gabby and Claire, who've recently collaborated on Rainforest Lifelines, which is an incredible ceremonial project. So Claire's from Friends of the Earth, and Gabby is an artist based in Bristol. I'm just gonna, when you're ready, Gabby, you can make a start if it's you speaking first, and I will spotlight you.
Just share my screen. Hopefully people can see that.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so Claire and I, who are, I'm just going to remove that, who are in the centre of the photo on the right-hand side, are linked through the CUT campaign, which is a campaign to clean up the tropical timber trade. It's a coalition that I helped found, and which Friends of the Earth is a key member of. We launched in 2023 with a rainforest funeral ceremony under Cecilia Vicuna's amazing Rainforest Kipu installation in the Turbine Hall at the Tate Modern. So CUT works to amplify the voices of Indigenous peoples who are fighting to protect their homelands, and in Sarawak. And Sarawak is Malaysia's largest state, located in the northwest of Borneo. At the end of 2024, I was approached by Friends of the Earth to create a solidarity art event to coincide with the planned visit by a delegation of 9 Indigenous rainforest defenders from Sarawak to the UK. Over a few months and many online meetings and some slightly stressful dead ends trying to find venues, the loose idea of a solidarity art event developed into our Rainforest Lifeline ceremony. So right from the start, the project included Celine Lim in Sarawak as a key collaborative partner. She is the director of grassroots campaigning organisation Save Rivers, and her involvement ensured that Sarawak's peoples and traditions were authentically and respectfully represented. Rainforest Lifelines was an opportunity for the Sarawakian delegation to join with allies in the UK to celebrate and communicate the wisdom held in their ancestral teachings. These are teachings that put the well-being of land and community above all else, and which we believe have the potential to be lifelines for us all. As one of the participants said afterwards, I love this quote, "Rights and justice are not separate from culture, memory, and celebration. You can disrupt systems in a joyful way." Our ceremony included ritual objects, song, dance, and a traditional blessing. It required collaboration with poets, musicians, prop makers, curators, filmmakers, participants, and the audience even joined in at the end too. Led by Celine, Rainforest Lifelines was performed at 2 amazingly supportive venues, outside at London's Orleans House Gallery and here at Manchester Museum, which was also incredibly attuned to our values too, like Orleans House was. The London ceremony was filmed live and is at the heart of a short video commissioned by Friends of the Earth as part of its Planet Over Profit campaign, which I think Claire will be talking to, and how this is kind of ties in with the work that Friends of the Earth is doing. So my CUT colleague, Feng Ho, and I were officially contracted by Friends of the Earth for 20 days work between us. And we were supported by campaigners and a project manager at Friends of the Earth. For me, Rainforest Lifelines was the first time I've really been properly paid for this kind of work. And so I'm really grateful for Friends of the Earth for putting their trust in me. It was a complicated project to manage because we were liaising with people all over the world and with multi-layered collaborations between at least 6 different campaigning organisations, more than 8 creative contributors, 2 venues, and over 40 ceremony participants. Yeah, so I think that's kind of me introducing it, and I think Claire's going to talk about how this works for Friends of the Earth.
Thanks, Gabby. Just first off to say how amazing Gabby was at pulling this off. It was, as she said, a hugely complex undertaking. And to be fair, when I started thinking about what I wanted to say in this session, I think with hindsight, we probably didn't have clear enough objectives for what we wanted to actually achieve with Rainforest Lifelines, which I guess was both a negative and a positive in a way that left it a little bit more open. And I think one of the important things that environmental organisations, and we've certainly learned with this collaboration, is the need to be flexible and open and trusting the process to an extent. But on the other side of things, it probably would have been helpful to Gabby to have a clearer shared understanding, I think, of exactly what we wanted to build together and to do with this creative collaboration. But in terms of where this fits into our campaigning, so we run a campaign, as Gabby mentioned, called Planet Over Profit, which is about looking at UK company impacts around the world, particularly in relation to their environmental harms like deforestation, and the links to human rights abuses, which are often interconnected with those environmental harms. So when it comes to deforestation, that often involves obviously Indigenous communities losing land or losing access to the forest that they depend on for their own sort of community and their own livelihoods. So we're trying to kind of highlight the impacts of those harms overseas and bring those to the attention of the public decision makers here in the UK, and particularly where there are links through directly to UK businesses, supply chains through whether it's food or furniture, through timber extraction and so on. And ultimately, we're trying to campaign for a new law to hold companies to account for their environmental harms and human rights abuses in their supply chains. And it's a big campaign. So we call it Planet Over Profit at Friends of the Earth, which is focused on deforestation, but we collaborate with a whole alliance of organisations in the Corporate Justice Coalition, which is campaigning for this law. But specifically, one of the areas we focus on as part of the campaign is this work with CUT, as Gabby's set out, which focuses on the timber extraction, logging from Sarawak and more broadly in Peninsular Malaysia. And a key part of that work is trying to make people care about why we need to do something here to stop this. And obviously, I think this is at the heart of what we're all trying to do, is how we connect with people and motivate them to join our struggle in calling for a healed world, a fairer world. And you know, some of these campaigns, the challenge can be that it does get very technical if you're talking about new laws or policies, and it can get very dry. And I think the beauty of this kind of collaboration is it helps us to breathe life into the campaign and to really connect with not just the impacts on the ground, which can be pretty heartbreaking, but actually the struggles and the solutions that people, Indigenous people in Sarawak in this case, are working on themselves and proposing, and just bringing some of that joy and that creativity, you know, through to the UK into our what is sometimes fairly dry campaigning. We obviously try not to make it dry, and this is a kind of key way to sort of bring that story to life. And so the collaboration in terms of this particular event was quite opportunistic, because the visitors from Sarawak already had a visit to Europe and to London organised, which was completely separate from our campaign. So we obviously saw that as a key opportunity to kind of jump on that. And sometimes with campaigns and with these collaborations, you do have to just go with an opportunity, even if the timeline is ridiculously short, which this one was quite challenging. And so that didn't help in terms of, as Gabby mentioned, some of those complexities that were involved in pulling this together. But we had an unmovable opportunity so that we just had to use. And so we wanted to use it to again, you know, highlight the impacts of timber extraction, bring that to the attention of UK kind of policymakers and public, and really connect with them about why they need to help us protect forests for future generations. But yeah, so we wanted to do something creative, and the reason we wanted to do something creative is because Gabby created the amazing rainforest funeral back in 2023 at the Tate Modern, which she mentioned. Through that, which was a slightly different collaboration, we managed to again create a film around that, which had something like I can't remember how many views on YouTube, Gabby. I don't know if you remember. I did just look and somehow the numbers changed, but it was definitely over about 40,000. It might have even been more, but a lot more than we had sort of anticipated for something like that. And we had sort of wanted to almost try and recreate that in a kind of new way with this new opportunity with the Sarawackian visitors being here in the UK. And so we did have this slightly vague, you know, we had a whole timetable of things we were doing with our visitors from Sarawak over the period of time they were here. So there were other meetings, for instance, at Kew Gardens, where they kind of got to explore the herbarium and look at some of the history of the sort of colonial exploitation of, you know, plants and trees in Sarawak, and some of the specimens they had there, which was really interesting. We had some political meetings. We wanted them to be able to meet with our local activists. So they had quite a busy schedule of events outside of the creative Rainforest Lifelines events. And so we had some kind of key objectives around the whole visit, but I think, as I said at the beginning, we probably didn't have a clear enough idea of what we wanted to get out of the artistic collaboration, but we just wanted to bring something different to the public here. And the key kind of output from the event, obviously, for those people who were present was that, you know, that kind of opportunity of being involved in something really unique and special that will never happen again here in the UK. But we also wanted to capture that in a film, which we have done, and we can share the links to both of the films actually, from Rainforest Lifelines and from the Rainforest Funeral. We can pop them in the chat later. But I think, yeah, so I think that did create some difficulty in terms of, you know, what exactly we wanted to get out. But as I said, I'm sort of torn, because in a way it didn't constrain, Gabby, I don't know if you agree, but it didn't maybe constrain you as much. But yeah, you know, we've worked with Gabby before. We know she's, you know, has these amazing creative ideas, and personally, I was happy to kind of trust her to go with that. I think in terms of just moving on to some of the challenges, I think, you know, working with environmental organisations, and Karine did pick up on most of these issues. I think different people within the organisation might have different expectations of the project and the outcomes and the objectives and what they want to achieve with it. And I think if there is a collaboration like this, I think, main piece of advice or learning around it would be to very early on get a really good sense of who's involved in this project, who from the environmental organisation side needs to be involved in any decisions or any sign off or any agreement about what happens, and how much control will the artist have, or in terms of decision making. Is that a shared thing? Sometimes what happens in organisations is you'll have you know, you might be working as an artist with one particular person, but then that person's got to go back and talk to 3 or 4 or 5 other people in different teams and involve them in some way. So that can get quite tricky. And I think as long as that's very clear at the beginning, and those different expectations and timelines and so on are kind of flushed out early on, I think that is probably really, yeah, probably the most important thing I would say to do right at the start, and to have a really honest conversation early on. And Gabby and I were talking about this the other day, and we were thinking, actually, you know, doing that in person, I think would be really, really helpful. Just because obviously you lose a lot in communicating over Zoom, which obviously can help collaboration, particularly when we're talking about working with people overseas. But again, you don't get that kind of personal connection. But I just also, before I finished, wanted to mention a little bit more about Friends of the Earth and how we work, and, you know, in terms of potentially thinking about different opportunities that there might be for future collaborations, and then why this kind of this ceremony kind of really was important for us because of the type of organisation we are. So we're a global grassroots environmental movement. We're present in around 70 countries around the world. We have a kind of local to global vision. So we, although have this global network, we also here in the UK have grassroots environmental activists working in their communities, and they're autonomous. So it's not like we decide at a national or even international level what everyone works on and they just go on and fundraise or run our campaigns locally. But those groups in those communities, and there's around 120, I think, now in the UK, they both help us with our national campaigns, but they also run their own local campaigns on local issues that resonate, whether it's on nature or on, you know, on climate and transport and different issues. And a lot of those groups will have their own networks locally and will work with other community groups, other creative organisations, social groups, unions, depending on the work they're focused on. So there's huge opportunity within those networks, I think, to collaborate in more creative ways, and for artists to join with those campaigners, to bring, you know, to help them, as I said at the beginning, kind of develop their campaigns and help people to connect with them in a way that art can only do. And it's, yeah, it's challenging sometimes to, as I said, to get our messages across, and I think that art can really help different people connect. But as well as our local groups, we have a sort of middle layer in terms of our regional campaign organisers that are based in all the English regions. We also have a national office in Wales and in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. Friends of the Earth Scotland is a separate organisation, which is slightly strange, but historically, yeah, separate organisation. But we have those regional structures in England with those campaign organisers that support groups in their areas, and some of them have done some really amazing collaborations in their regions with artists. So we've just had some recently in the Northeast. We've got an amazing regional campaign organiser who's very connected into the arts space, and she's done some brilliant collaborations with this Baltic organisation, arts organisation, and actually done things through the dance and other medium. So yeah, so there are huge opportunities within Friends of the Earth. Obviously, funding is a big issue. Our local groups are volunteers, most of them. But there are pots of money that they can access for local work and specifically for partnership work, actually. So there are ways of you know, collaborating and potentially getting funding for particular projects. And so I'm very happy to put people in touch, you know, with, you know, the organizer in particular areas, if anyone's interested in finding out a bit more about possible opportunities with Friends of the Earth, because I think it is, you know, Karine covered it all really well, like why it's important for environmental organisations to collaborate with artists. And I think ultimately it comes down to just inspiring people and inspiring some hope. I think often in environmental campaigning, it can get so difficult. You know, eco-anxiety is through the roof. We know that, particularly in young people. We know there's multiple crises, but I think coming together and having that sense of community and building a sense of hope is something, yeah, really special that I think these kind of collaborations can do. So I will stop there and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much both. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Gabby. It was really, really, yeah, wonderfully articulated and yeah, really useful to hear both of your perspectives. And I love that phrase you said, Claire, that the creativity really helps to breathe life into the campaign. I think that really sums it up beautifully. We are going to hear now briefly from Emanuela, maybe for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll go on to Sass. I'm just going to change the spotlighting and Emanuela, So Manuela, you were involved in this in the Rainforest Lifeline ceremony. Do you want to give a little bit of an introduction and then, yeah, speak a little bit about the rest of your work?
Okay, so my name is Emanuela. I'm based in Manchester. I'm an artist and a community development officer. I was approached by someone from a local community organization here in Manchester called Community Arts Northwest, because they know how I do climate justice work. So they talked to me about that project with the Friend of the Earth, if I was interested in taking part. So that's how I took part in that project. Basically, Gabby has talked about it, and the previous speaker. So originally, I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what I do really, whatever I do, the tendency is just I mix art with whatever I'm doing. So I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a storyteller. I facilitate music workshops. I'm also a creative producer because I'm involved in local African history and heritage. So I coordinate, produce projects around that, or I curate exhibitions and other heritage project to do with that. How I started my climate justice work, it was just before the COVID outbreak in 2019. I was invited to talk in a local radio show where people were talking about the impact of climate change on different subgroup of people in the community. I guess I was brought in to share my experience as someone with a migrant background. Actually, during that show, I realized how, of course, things have improved since then, even if we still have a lot of work to do, but it's getting better and better. But back then, really, people were not really conscious of the fact that climate change, it might be a global crisis. However, people experience it differently based on who you are, where you live, and different realities in people's life. I also realized that in climate conversation, we lacked a good representation of different perspectives, personal experiences, because like I said, in my country of origin, for example, of course, we have the understanding of climate change as things like droughts, flooding, plastic, all those. But for us, really, if you ask most Congolese, their understanding of climate change, their personal experiences of climate change, is that connection between climate change and capitalism, profits, multinationals, wars and armed conflict, child labor, poverty, immigration. That's at the moment our understanding or our priority when it comes to climate change. I'm not saying the plastic issue is minor or drought, flood is minor. No, we have those. But the priority for us, it's that connection. For us, our understanding of environmental destruction, climate change, like I said, it's capitalism and profits. It's multinationals, like the previous speaker said it. It's human rights abuse. Locally in Congo, it's suffering of indigenous people. In the past, they used to call them pygmies, but for them, it's the derogative name. They preferred to be called Mbuti, Baka, Twa, and so on. So that's our understanding of climate change. So being an artist, the way I found to share, because I felt like, okay, I need to raise awareness, to share with other how experiences people have of climate change in other parts of the world, especially in the global south, because Congo is a global south country. But the best way I found to do that, to raise awareness, to share, to bring this other perspective with this other perspective and personal experiences, was through my practice, which is art. So I tend either what I do, I'm invited to talk about what I'm just talking about right now. I can do that just as a simple talk, like what I'm doing now, or I use art. I combine music, storytelling, sounds, imagery to talk about that. And I always build in that a kind of call response so that the audience also can take part in that conversation, because we all have personal experiences of climate change and personal opinions, and also we always manage to have like a Q&A. I think in few words, because I've got just 5 minutes, that's who I am and that's what I do, if I made any sense anyway.
Thank you so much, Emanuela. You're such a powerful storyteller, and it's lots of people clapping and sending hearts. And yeah, thank you so much for joining and for really shining a light on the systemic injustices at the heart of the climate crisis, and for naming capitalism and profit as being the biggest drivers and the biggest problems. And are you going to be potentially going on to do more collaborative work with environmental organizations, or what's in the pipeline for you? What are your plans?
So currently we're talking with Friends of the Earth, the Manchester department. So I think we've had a session in which we had brainstorming, we had a lot of ideas. Now I think they had to report back to people a bit higher, or to the big team, so that they can really understand the different ideas we thought about. And after that, I think it's going to be a matter of just finding some some resources to see if we can do something here locally in Manchester. So that's one plan. And next week, I'm going to London. I don't remember the name of the organization, but it's through Counterpoint Arts. It's like a think tank session. We'll have exactly about the connection between climate change and migration. Also, art will be in between that somewhere there. Currently, that's what I'm planning to do. I'm doing, but I don't have much online, but if you Google search, you YouTube search Emanuela Yogolelo, some videos of my performances, of my talk, my pop-up, and you can have more idea about myself and the work I do around climate with a justice perspective. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, we'll share some links to your work in the chat, and I can see there's a couple of people, someone based in Manchester, who'd love to connect with you. So if people do want to stay in touch or build collaborations, put a note in the chat, and I'll always try and facilitate those after these meetings, so I can put people in touch with each other or share contacts and that sort of thing. Brilliant. Okay, we're now going to hear from Sass. So I'm just going to remove the spotlight and pin you. And over to you when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Tesni, and everyone else who's spoken. It's been such a delight. I'm so inspired. So I'm Sass. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a producer and a multidisciplinary artist, and I am the founder of a project called Hollow Space, which is still in creation. So we're still at the beginning phase of setting out on our work. I know Culture Declares Emergency, having worked as an artist with Kay Michael years ago in like 2018. So my relationship with and understanding of Culture Declares Emergency is very long-standing and hugely admiring. And that it makes it feel even more rightful and even more aligned to be here today and to share about the work I've been doing, because relationships I built 7 years ago seem to be supporting this larger network of creative spirits and organizers who are making really tangible change that can be deeply felt now. And that's a very quick turnaround, I think. So yeah, I, just for a tiny bit more context, have a strand to my work that is around nature recovery, but that is not all of the work that I make as an artist and producer. But within that, I have done a conservation training with Ambios down in Devon. That was part of the due diligence of understanding the land and the earth that I advocate for in my work. I'm a really strong believer that it's difficult to make artwork without having a deep understanding of the thing that you're trying to speak for. And then there's a sort of academic side to what I do. I often speak at things and talk about the relevance of art to environmental change and organisations in nature recovery. I spoke with Citizen Zoo at the University of Cambridge at the beginning of this year. There's lots of other things popping up.
Here's a big offer worth checking out. In people's postcode lotteries.
Oh, sorry, did someone hear that? Yeah, okay, cool. I
Yeah,
was
don't worry about that. I'm not sure what
okay,
that
I
was.
had my notes up and I wasn't sure what was going on because I'm not looking at the Zoom screen at the same time. Glad that all is well. So yeah, so that's the context on me. And then Hollow Space, it is this visionary, fearless, crazy art project. It is a micro museum and pop-up performance space. It is a micro museum of the ancient woodland. The design is it's shaped like a hollow oak, just like the beginning of the trunk, hollow, and then a platform at the top. And on that sits a tree house. The tree house is a venue, it's like a stage you can perform on, and it's designed mostly for music performances, but can also hold poetry, small pieces of dance and theatre. The design of the project is that it will launch next summer and then the following summer do a tour of the UK. It does a long weekend in a city and then brings the people that it's engaged there to the nearest site of ancient woodland for gigs and performances. And so were you to engage with this next summer and we were in London, then you would see Hollow Space popped up in one of the centres in London. And there would be free workshops and free performances, and we'd be working with local schools and community groups to offer some ancient woodland education. And that's because we have this huge value in repairing the cultural ties to the land that we are increasingly alienated from. It's based in quite a lot of research. Ancient woodlands in the UK host just over 40% of the UK's rare and threatened species, but they only cover 2.5% of the nation's land. Having done a lot of research and a lot of work around conservation, I'm very aware that the UK is one of the least wild places in Europe. It is a really staggering scenario we find ourselves in environmentally, and therefore very much there's hunger and a call for giving people who live in this country an opportunity to understand why they should even care. Because the level of people living in urban spaces and the scale of agriculture means that a lot of people don't have any kind of ancient land in their day-to-day life and therefore have no reason to believe in it, want it to survive, want these rare and threatened species not to die. So yeah, so that's what the aim of this space is to say, well, let's start to give ourselves a creative reason to feel like we belong in those spaces and want to learn about them and to protect them. And we are funded by the Woodland Trust and building on those funds. The Woodland Trust run a competition which they just lost their funding to renew. It used to be yearly, called Igniting Innovation. That is a competition for funds, and I think for any artist in the room, it's worth writing down and having a look at their website and having a look at sort of who set it up and why. And the competition is to give money to people with particularly innovative ideas on how to ignite connection between the larger public and woodland landscapes. And that was highly relevant to this idea that I was developing. And as I described at the top of this, I am a producer and an artist, and this is one of the rare projects, where I am both the artist who came up with the idea and the producer making it happen. So we went through 3 stages in that competition, writing a big application, I think it was like 2,000 words, doing a video pitch, and then pitching in front of a panel and a live audience. And then we won money and also mentoring from them, which is really wonderful because it gives us one person who takes a role in our project to say, I know exactly how that's going to affect the woodland if you take that venue in it in this way, or if you want to think about marshy woodlands, then come to this site. It's very much like the relationship that you'd have with anyone who's given you a grant. If anyone's worked in that way before, we have an agreement. We're bound to the policies within that. We're bound to particular timelines and uses of funding. And that's kind of the project itself. I've written down a few things about the learnings because I think we were all given a set of questions before we came to speak, that I think Tesney and CDE wanted us to kind of respond to. And so I'm just going to talk about what the takeaways are from this. So on the theme of why should these collaborations be happening, I think a lot of people have pointed towards it. But this notion that artists tell an engaging and compelling story better than anyone else. I really believe in this. I do some work in the fundraising team of the Green Party, and I've had quite a lot of conversations recently with Zach Polanski. And it's funny because it's one of those scenarios where I'm there very much to push data around, be in spreadsheets and make stuff happen. And yet both of us are theatre kids at heart who understand how to get someone to believe in something. And getting someone to believe in something is about igniting a sense of hope in them. And what artists do is not have necessarily a great sense of responsibility to make things better for others in the way that a not-for-profit might, or an organisation might say, I actually just want to make this better for this group of people, so we'll raise the funds and we'll run the campaigns. Artists make work from a generosity of spirit to express how they feel and what they see in the world to others. It's a very unique part of the human condition that we do it, but whenever we do it, it usually creates a sense of unity and a sense of group understanding in what is going on in the world. And it's a very critical feature to the way that we socialize with one another. And that is a really nice, simple thing, because it's a reminder that if you are an organization or you are an artist, it's okay to let one do the other thing. Like, if you're the organization and you're making things better for people, that is okay. You can do that role. It's not necessarily to ask the artist to then feel that they are also responsible for that. The artist might be working thematically around the same ideas, and coming from similar desires of hope for a better world. But the artist will be expressing in ways that simply need to be heard. And the question for successful collaboration, in my experience, is always, how do you best support that vision? What structure do you need to bring to elevate that voice? So yeah, that's about that. And then in terms of the sort of the challenges and what can support an effective partnership and what is a roadblock? There's not so much to add after some of the brilliant things that have been said today. But I will pick up on something that Claire touched on. I think Claire was talking around the relationship management with an organisation. And as someone who produces, I find myself time and time again advocating, and I think Karine said this as well, for the importance of excellent relationship management at the outset of a project. And this is one of those skills that producers have and develop, and then people don't know what a producer is because it's this sort of theatre word for a project manager. Having an ability to bridge the world of a creative vision that can feel expansive and nebulous with organizational structures and financial structures that require policies, contracting, deadlines, and getting down to the brass tacks of a bottom line is what makes a collaboration successful. And usually when you have both together, everyone is able to have their needs met. And so I think that you can bring together an organization with some of the tightest turnarounds and the most specific expectations with some of the most visionary artists. If you have someone on board who is bridging those worlds, writing those documents, holding those meetings, making sure those spreadsheets are really clear, because that is how you steward something to exist. So yeah, Claire mentioned early meetings. People have been talking about setting expectations with really solid parameters. And that's the early work of any successful project, whether it's environmental organizations and artists or any other collaboration I've ever seen. I've just been working at the National, and none of the work that I did with them was around environmental change or climate crisis, but the exact same behavior was there. And that's a really good example because the National Theatre often becomes a stakeholder as an organisation with other artists who are working independently. And they employ 800 people minimum at any one time, and it can fluctuate up to 1,200. And often 200 of those people need to sign off something so that one artist can be worked with. The reason it's possible to make projects happen that are crazy, exciting, very compelling, push the boundaries of form is because there is very rigorous and clear structure on how they do things. And that means they can turn stuff around really quickly. It's very different when we work at a grassroots scale because often, we're challenging the structures of creation to try and be less sort of quick to burnout or less quick to being too resource intensive. But the structure begets the clarity that makes the art happen. And in my experience of listening to the way the land works itself, generally in any ecosystem, there's an extremely clear structure that makes food move around the ecosystem or the ability for plants and land to rest. And so I'd really encourage that to anyone who's making these collaborations happen, to work out a structure that really supports the work itself. And then in terms of any advice, there was this question at the end of the things we were given of, do you know of any upcoming opportunities or have any advice for people wanting to embark on these collaborations? And I have one thing about data. I think that we live in a world very much of data, and data driving things. And it's really important not to be scared of it in environmental artist collaborations, because good data tells a really good story and it enables you to have the kind of clarity that I was talking about earlier. So if you are working with someone as a environmental organization and they have delivered anything like this before, if they have any evaluation data because they worked with a community or they worked on a massive sculpture that lots of the public came to see, if they did any forms, any feedback, having a look at that data will give you a really strong sense of what mistakes to avoid, etc. And doing that as you work through a project is a really good idea, because usually collaborations are iterative, and the first time you collaborate, you bump up against the most mistakes, and then it becomes more and more well-oiled. And sometimes we can start collaborations with more data than we otherwise would, because we're so excited by the very generative, very clicky, let's have a conversation that's really creative about the vision of this thing. And if you have that conversation that's all up here, and like, oh, we could do this and it'll be like that, and you underwrite it with a strong understanding of what has gone well before and what has gone badly before, you will usually come up with a more realistic project. Yeah, and it is always taxing and trying to ask someone who's just engaged with a piece of art to then fill out a feedback form, but it's so useful. I can't recommend it enough for making something successful. And I think on both sides of a collaboration, it can foster trust, because it gives both people a very objective sense of how something might go. And then the last thing, there was this question of knowing any upcoming opportunities. I really wouldn't ever wait for an upcoming opportunity. Of course, organisations make these very clear opportunities for artists to come forward for funding or to come forward for collaboration. But generally, my experience is that unless an organisation has the time to be constantly meeting lots of creatives, they don't know what is possible. And there are opportunities where you're not doorstepping, you're not overburdening an organisation's time to introduce yourself and start a conversation about whether there is connection there. And that means when commission time comes around, the beginning of a project comes around, both sides know a little bit more about the other and why that would go well. It's often not possible to introduce yourself very well over an application form for funding or just an email. And I would say in the other direction, any organizations or anyone present who's representing one, just factoring time into people's timetables to send them off to some sort of exhibition or performance where there will be some networking after once a month will create relationships that you then don't have to pay for time to create later down the line with application forms or meeting days. That level of like curiosity to collaborate should just be part of the way we're operating all the time. And some of my best mentors who are very much the leaders of fields in the arts and in theatre always say to me, never, ever turn down a meeting. Even if you think someone's the biggest person in the world or absolutely nothing, you have no idea how useful that connection might be. So always say yes, even if it's just for a 5-minute chat. We are a family of people trying to make the world better together. And unless we trust each other to meet each other and hear each other out, we're not going to get there. Those are all the thoughts. These are all the things that I prepared. I know there's going to be a bit of time for chat and questions after. So if you're curious about anything I said, you want to probe deeper, please do. I'm aware this has been extremely top line and I wish I could have said lots more. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sass. That was super brilliant. So yeah, the energy behind your messages and the clarity with which you speak, I think has been like super valuable to everyone in the room. I could see a lot of people nodding along and clapping, and yeah, thank you to speaking to the necessity of structure and like really carefully managing relationships. And also for your work with Hollow Space, that really, really crucial work of weaving people back into the land and into ancient landscapes. So thank you. We've got about 8 minutes or so before we're going to close this meeting. So does anyone, I'm going to remove you from the spotlight. And just to note that our next breakfast next month will be a totally open space. So we'll have much more time for kind of open discussion and people to come and bring and share their questions and projects. But yeah, does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Any specific questions for our speakers? If you'd like to put a hand up in case there's a few of you, and then we'll just go in that order. Flick, I can see your hand.
Hi. Yes, it's more of a sort of open question really to everybody. And it's picking up on what Sass was saying about the data and the fact that, you know, we need to gather data on you know, audiences' experiences and stuff. And I know from my own personal experience and also trying to get that data from people, that sort of slight turn off once you've experienced an amazing piece of work, which, you know, Sass acknowledged. I'm just wondering if there are more creative ways of doing it and what that might be, that it isn't a piece of paper or people wandering around with bits of paper and pens, especially when you're working in the outdoor arts. You know, it's quite a sort of bun fight at the end to kind of grab stuff. So it's an open question, it's a thought, it's a, you know, thinking about how that could work as another way. Thank you.
I have some immediate thoughts if it's
Go
useful.
for it, definitely.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think this reminds me of my work around activations, which is really just quite a corporate term for making people excited through art. The more you can gamify it, the more fun it is. So if you're able to find a line in the budget for one person who's going to do that on the day, if they can be creatively dressed, if there can be a bit of a fun script around how they're approaching people, or if you're able to get a small stand with buttons, people can just press them, and their bizarre shapes or their fun forms, and the feedback's coming in those really simple ways, that's really nice. Or if you're working outdoor, even if it's like questions that are written up in a little area of feedback, and it's throw a pine cone in that button in that box if you strongly agree that this was a valuable experience. It doesn't have to be a form, as long as you're getting people to respond to some questions. So I hope that makes sense. And you can definitely get really wacky with it. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any ideas they'd like to share in response to that question, or any other thoughts or questions?
It's always really hard to be creative. One thing we had found really useful, and that's really conventional, I suppose, but we didn't have the forms to complete, but we really had people going to chat rather than just shoving your form and for people to fill in, but really to try to get really those emotional reaction that people had as they just experience the work, and but also capturing things through film documentary. So there's it's expensive, but depending on the project, it's where you have to be strategic. And with Tape, we did it because we knew we were onto something big and something that would probably be quite a turning point in terms of how we could work together in the future. And we needed to make a strong case for that. So capturing that data, be really clear and focused about what we wanted to capture as well, because there's so much you can't capture, but we wanted to move away from just the stats. So that's filming people, but because we'd created this really informal, nurturing, safe environment to chat with people all the way through. We were so present on the ground, and I would say build that in the work you do. It's not just the artwork and the experience, it's all the engagement that's going to happen on the ground as you build the work in the space and people start to get intrigued. But like I said, accumulate all the learning so you can really meet them where they come from, because some of them won't come from the arts at all, but they will want reassuring about you not damaging nature. So, but all this is all part of that plan of capturing that data, those reactions that you can learn from, but you can also use as an advocacy tool. So choose wisely where you can invest a little money you may have. I think that'd be my advice.
Thank you, Karine. Got about a minute if anyone else wants to share anything. Sorry, I hate squeezing this in. That's why the open space is good. We'll have more time next month, but if anyone else wants to add anything.
I just wanted to say that I'm really glad to see Andy Franz-Kauiak here, who was the curator at Orleans House in Twickenham for us. And I think Andy also works for the local council. So there's a really good kind of crossover of kind of working approaches there. I don't know if you've got anything to share, Andy.
Probably lots. So probably not quite enough time, but thank you, Gabby, and amazing to see lots of familiar faces and new faces, and we were so lucky to welcome Gabby and all the people from Sarawak and others to Orleans House Gallery, and for us it has left a wonderful story with our place, with our home, Orleans House Gallery. If you've not been, please do come down. It's a remarkable ecosystem on the river with a woodland, contemporary art, a colonial building. So for us, we've been doing cultural reforesting for 5 years, where artists are leading us through the big question, how can we renew our relationship with nature? And so we welcome any of you to kind of, obviously you are already very much in this movement, but would love conversations, whether that's 5 minutes, as Sass mentioned, or months or years in the kind of growing. So we very much are opening ourselves up to the next 5 years of this program. It's, I say, it's lasting 10 years, at least, who knows? And we're being taken to lots of different places by artists and their collaborators, their friends, the more than human world, the intentions of communities that we work with. As you said, a local authority, as a local authority, as well as an art service, as well as a gallery, as well as a human animal, as you know, with all these contexts, we kind of sit here hoping that we can share this idea of how our culture should evolve, needs to evolve, and kind of that cultural reforesting. So the culture part of that cultural reforesting is so clear and so key in what this is all about. So yeah, that's, as I say, a huge amount to say. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing what you've shared, and Gabby even giving me a second to say hello to everybody. And yeah, please do get in touch if you'd like to know more, and we can take a walk in the woods of Orleans House Gallery and see what the woods wants to share with us as well. So yeah, thank you, Tesni, and everybody else for giving this moment of opportunity, and Gabby and the team from Sarawak. I say that moment will be forever in the compost, in the kind of ecosystem of Orleans, and so it's wonderful to revisit it in such an imaginative way.
Thanks, Andy. It's brilliant to hear from you, and that open invitation to come and connect. We'll have to close this now, but thank you so much, everyone. It's been such an inspiring, such an inspiring morning, and some really useful advice and learnings shared by everyone. I think we can all take forward. So I normally send around a little email in the next day or so with kind of key things that were shared in the chat, people's contacts, sort of possibilities for collaboration. So and a transcript as well of the chat, and then we'll put the recording for this event on YouTube and on the Culture Declares website. We've got a monthly Substack which kind of goes out when I get around to writing it at the start of the month, but we share lots of updates and opportunities from the movement, and we always share our events in there. So our next event will be the open space at the end of next month, so just keep an eye on our social media and newsletter for the link to that. Have a lovely rest of your day.